nation, he writes in there, and I heard him say it many times. He was a close personal friend. Walk towards the fire. Their bullets aren't real. And I have walked towards the fire for more than 20 years. And some would say that there's an argument to be made on whether the bullets are real or not. But I've had to walk through the fire. And there's narrative in there about a little bit of my earlier life that lays the foundation. And then through this episode, but also a significant amount of conservative philosophy and a sense of the trend of where our society is going, what's dividing us, and some of what it's going to take to fix it.
Well, I have a funny question for you here. I'm going to get off the book just for a minute. I'll come back, I promise. What is your definition of racism?
Boy, that might be a stumper.
Here, can I give you mine? Can I give you mine?
Sure.
And I've said it. I've said it many times on the air. Racism infects a person if the person really believes that because of his ethnic or his or her ethnic or religious background, they are superior to all other ethnic groups and religious groups. That is racism. I am not a racist. I have never been a racist. That's the end of the story.
Well, I'd say, Mike, neither am I a racist nor a virtue signaler. And
no, I'm not that either.
But, I've resisted virtue signaling because I think it's pandering and it's phony. I think we should be able to talk about culture and civilization objectively, independent from race. And I've said many times, in fact, it's in my book, it's not about race. It's never been about race. People use race as a marker sometimes, and they may or may not be correct because it might indicate what your background is, what your culture is.
Right.
But here's this. We are all created in God's image. He created us, and I believe that. And I don't think anybody doubts that. And so can you imagine going off to heaven and having it segregated or having several levels of heaven because of somebody's skin color? I mean, I walked into a church in Port Gibson, Mississippi, where Jim Bowie's family built that church. They built a balcony for the blacks, the ground floor for the whites. And as I stood there with Father Tony Pudens, who comes out of Odebo, by the way, he said, here in this pew last week, we buried the editor of the newspaper who in 1965, with his 5 children and a wife, were knelt here at this pew before Mass started. They got up and walked to the back of the church, up the stairs, and knelt with the blacks and prayed and worshiped with the blacks. And he said half of this congregation got up and walked across the street to the Episcopalian church where they go to church this very day. The people that walked across that street are the racists.
I'd have to say yes. I would have to say. I asked that because you've been called a racist several times.
Mm-hmm.
And
I hesitated on the definition because of that. Everything is racist to the people that use that word.
Well, that's where I was kind of going with this. I've been called. It's been implied that I am a racist as well. And I'll tell you what, I'm not a racist. There's so many false and ugly accusations running around. I've been called a rape sympathizer. I've been called all kinds of terrible things. None of them are even remotely close to the truth. For God's sake, rape sympathizer. What sort of lunatic would be that? But it seems to be an all-purpose insult to shut down discussion, and I won't let that happen. I believe the only way we can move forward as a society, a multicultural society, is to keep the discussion open, not have one side lecturing the other. And whether it's white people lecturing all the other groups or other groups lecturing white people and trying to shame them, I think it's wrong. And I think there's a hint of racism and ugliness in the left's message in regard to race, frankly.
Well, I'd say more than a little. I'm engaged with these folks consistently, and for all these years, for 16 years, I served on the House Judiciary Committee, the most polarized and multicultural committee on the Hill. And to many of them, they see everything through the prism of race. She said Richmond. They come to mind, Maxine Waters. These are all people that I've done verbal battle with. In fact, Cedric Richmond called me out once for quoting the homicide data from New Orleans.
Well, of course.
That made me racist.
That's so easy and lazy to make that accusation. Oh, you're racist. Hi, I have a question on your behavior. Well, that's because you're a racist. Come on, man. Yeah, that's just ridiculous.
Well, yeah, but what's also true about those people, and I'll use Lee as an example. Most people know her name, but she and I have traveled, or probably equivalent of around the world, a couple of, and all of that in places like Africa and Tibet, like places around the world, and all of that. Sheila will call me a racist. She will hammer on me, but she has not one single experience with that. It's because my skin's white, and that's all it takes. And so, where's your anecdote? You had multiple accusers of Kavanaugh, for example,
right?
And none of them, I thought, well, I don't have a single accuser, and never have had one who stood up and said Steve King that would wrap up all the names he's been called. There's not one. And you're your first witness, Lefty.
Well, according to some, free speech itself is a tool of white male oppression. Free speech. Did you hear what I said? Free speech itself. The First Amendment to the Constitution. It's first because it's the most important. Without free speech and freedom of thought, we cannot exist as a free people. They are trying to take that away from us by these silly accusations to shut people up and force them not to answer the legitimate questions that they have. It's nonsense.
Well, that's true, and the First Amendment is under assault right now. But freedom of speech, so you shut that down. You're shutting down ideas. You're saluting down the movements that might bring about the kind of change that we need into the more modern world, or to correct the injustices that exist out there. So whenever that effort took place, and when there's no question that Kevin McCarthy and Liz Cheney and others will do the max on me, and that has not only my freedom of speech, the representation of 750,000 congressional district, but it muzzled every conservative in America to some degree. Us conform with the thought process of these folks that think they are the opinion leaders, and if you don't do that, they'll find a way to shut you down. It isn't just Democrats. I mean, I expect them to do it, but what Kevin McCarthy did is unconscionable, and at this point, forgiveness comes after confession and repentance. That's good. That's good enough for God. It's good enough for me.
Now, I bet walking through the fire deals with Republicans who you feel have betrayed you to some extent.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and on the broader scale of this, the ones that the biggest disappointment is the numbers of good, solid Republicans who I would probably still call some of them friends, but we're friends certainly going into this, who just didn't have the spine to step up and do what they believed was right. And I would point out one of the people that did step up, and I'm not going to use his name. I don't use them in the book because I don't want them to be targeted. But he went to get some support so we could have a special conference and really air this out. And it was being shut down by leadership. And this freshman who had been just sworn in, I don't know, a month or two before, he said, "Why are you helping Steve King?" Well, and the answer he got was, because what they did to him is an injustice, and we need to, well, it's going to hurt you politically, so why would you even consider that? That's out of a freshman whom, I already know he's worthless. But that's the indication of how the equation, the political equation, dominates the equation of what's right and wrong.
Think about what you just said for a moment, Congressman. You didn't want to use his name because you didn't want him targeted. That's where we are in our free society today, ladies and gentlemen. We target people and we ruin their lives because they don't think like us. And we dance in the street when somebody loses their livelihood or their reputation is sullied and their children are ridiculed in school and their wives are shunned. That's what the opposition is. They love that sort of thing. They were dancing in the streets when President Trump got the COVID virus. I mean, literally. These people aren't the good people. They are not the good moral people. They say they're moral because we're fighting for Black lives. Fine, but I don't believe you're really doing that. I believe you're fighting for your own power and your own wealth, and you're using You're using people to this day.
You are exactly right on that. It is about power in the end, and they are. When you first bring out the assault on freedom of speech, all you have to do is start naming the pillars of American exceptionalism, which reflect the pillars of Western civilization, the exceptionalism of Western civilization, and the entire gamut of things that built this great country and are the first world today is Western civilization. I mean, if you're going to define first, second, and third world, it is first world's Western civilization, second world is Marxist, communist, and the third world is, as we know, the folks that are trying to emerge into something that we would call civilization.
Mm-hmm.
And so what made the West this strong? Freedom of speech, religion, the press, and assembly. For us, the right to keep and bear arms, property rights, free enterprise capitalism, a sound moral Judeo-Christian value base, and a sense that you had a purpose here in life. And that's to do due diligence and leave the world a better place than it was when you came. And we have built on that for generations. Science, technology, the curiosity, the objective, the age of reason, the age of enlightenment, the age of reason. You can trace this all the way back to the Greeks and thorough back to Mosaic law to find the foundations that we are today, and they're attacking it all from George Washington and Thomas Jefferson to Winston Churchill and Frederick Douglass, and who knows how many in between. And so it is the civilization, the culture they're attacking, and they think they can emerge with power when they do this. And when we grant their wishes, say, for example, when the governor sits down and meets with the leader of Black Lives Matter, at least twice that I know of, and we end up with an executive order, at least a promise of that says that felons can vote in contradiction to Iowa law, that gives them another chunk. And backing up from them does not get you peace. It only gives up more freedom for the rest of the people in this country, and it sacrifices the rule of law.
I've seen you questioned by major networks, and I have over our long association on the air asked you some pretty tough questions. You've never backed up, but apparently questions directed at how Black Lives Matter operates or how the Democrats are funded are suddenly racist. It's fantastic to me, really.
Well, yeah, and how are they funded? First of all, Black Lives Matter, my best inside information is it sprung up the day after Trayvon Martin was killed by George Zimmerman. And that in that concept is, if you say Black Lives Matter and you attack anyone who disagrees with Black Lives Matter, you put yourself up in a virtuous place where you can't be counterattacked. And then the funding for this, of course, put Antifa in there and stir the pot. And at a minimum, they're the brown shirts for Black Lives Matter. And Antifa is an amorphous organization. They aren't really top-down or structured. Black Lives Matter is. And they are funded, and we know that there's Soros money in there, but that's not the only money. The Act Blue, the massive fundraising machine of the Democratic Party, is raising money for Black Lives Matter, pumping it into the street, and that's bringing about the violence in the street. So trace it back. You've got Joe Biden's campaign and Kamala Harris's campaign that eventually are contributing to the fundraising effort that is fomenting violence in the streets, and that's one of the reasons why they won't renounce that violence. And by the way, they put the president on the spot for the Proud Boys.
Yeah, the Proud Boys. I'm not even sure who they are, but yeah.
And then I thought I better look that up. I didn't really study it very much. I just learned that 12 to 15% of the Proud Boys are minorities. So it's labeled a racist organization, but they're about the average mix that exists across the American populace.
This is a result of clueless white journalists reporting. That's frankly what it is. We have a bunch of guilt-ridden white people out there who are in journalism, and they're babbling about something that they don't know anything about, really.
Well, and it was Joe Biden that popped that into the debate. You could hardly hear it. You kind of had to do a rerun. But when the president said, "What about who do you want me to renounce? Who do you want me to tell them to stand down?" And Joe Biden said, "Proud Boys." A lot of Americans hadn't heard that before, didn't know what he even said. But
No.
People that need to be renounced, the ones that are out there day after day, that are committing violence in the streets in places like Portland, and that is Black Lives Matter, and that's Antifa, and that's a bunch of other organizations threaded within them. And I host a breakfast every Wednesday morning as chair of the Conservative Opportunity Society. What goes on in there is off the record, which is why a lot of people haven't heard from it. Usually high profile speakers. But I've been bringing in speakers on Antifa and on Black Lives Matter and this poison that's been spilled into our culture so that we understand what's going on. And Antifa, for example, you can trace them all the way back to the latter part of the 19th century. They sprung up in places like Germany. And then after the First World War, they were the ones that were in the streets taking on, let's see, and Antifa was the communist element in the streets of Germany and other countries across Europe, and even as far as England was concerned. And so, and they were doing battle with Hitler's brown shirts. And there's an argument to be made, if it weren't for the communists that had such a strong movement in places like Germany in the late 20s and throughout the 30s, the Nazis would not have had the traction to grow the way they did. But it was a conflict between Nazis and communists in Germany that brought about the Third Reich, that brought about the worst conflicts we've ever seen in the history of the world. So these guys grew out of this, and then they came over to the United States as Students for Democratic Society, SDS, the Weathermen, and also dabbled around in the Black Power movement as well. So we need to understand their history, what their foundation is, and BLM, by the way, they're a Marxist organization, and they say so.
Let's be clear about what we're talking about. The idea of a free exchange of ideas and difficult conversations that can move us forward, that's out. That's out. There, you can forget that. There'll only be blaming and directions in the future. We blame you for all of history's problems and for all the ills in our society, and for the rest of your lives and for your children's lives and grandchildren's lives, you get to sit down and shut up. Well, I'm still here, and so are you. So that's that ain't gonna happen.
Well,
right away.
okay. let's play a little bit more with this. What if? What if you pulled all of the contributions of Western civilization out of the world today? If you took every single accomplishment, every invention, everything that has to do with medicine, science, electricity, mechanics, fuel and energy, space travel, air travel, you take all of that out. I mean, I think then what is left? I mean, is it a cave and a club? Maybe a bow and arrow and fire? Not maybe even a wheel. So, you're going to disparage all of that because somebody's skin's not the same color as yours?
Oh,
come on. Help you.
Come on, Congressman. That's somebody was probably exploited in that process, so we can't. Nobody can lay claim to those terrific ideas. Congressman Steve King is our guest, and the name of your book is what, sir?
It is Walking Through the Fire.
Walking Through the Fire, and how we'll be able to buy that book?
Well, it's going to be in every venue that we can get it into, but we expect to have it up on Amazon, and there'll be a number of other ways. So, and I can't quite tell
been watching the debates. I enjoyed last night's debate much more than I did the Trump-Biden debate.
Yeah, me too.
At least there was. It looked like a debate to me for the most part. But I didn't. I haven't heard much about climate change, and I know that's your thing. I haven't.
It is my thing. And yesterday, a whole bunch of people who teach at colleges and universities in Iowa came out with a one-page statement saying not only that climate change is real, people all know that who are in that kind of a job, but how we can learn something from COVID-19 to work on climate change better.
Just as an aside, I was right. It's the only time I've ever been wrong is when I thought I was wrong and I wasn't.
And the Royals.
It was the Cincinnati Royals back
then. Oh, good. Okay.
Cincinnati Royals. But to climate change, have you heard enough in the debates or not? I know what you're.
No, but there was in too bad because that was the shouting match debate from last Tuesday. But yeah, that was the last question. Chris got onto it, said climate change, and Biden was waiting for that one.
I bet he was.
Trump's really been bad on that. Coming to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and telling us that wind power causes cancer. Gee whiz. Yeah, well, he certainly mistimed it. He must have thought he was in a different state. Because, 42% of our electricity last year.
Yeah, corn. It's like saying corn is really bad for you.
Yeah, it's similar.
Corn really sucks, and ethanol, I hate it.
Right. That's right.
And he seems to be saying that anyway through his actions. But that's why I think Joni Ernst is in big trouble. But we'll talk about that another time.
Yeah, but the climate change, and I think it's really important that you have people all over the state who are saying this. If you look at this list of professors, instructors, teachers, people who either research or teach about it, you find 230 people. And they're from 37 different colleges and universities. So it isn't just ISU and the University of Iowa. And you got Western Iowa community colleges. You got yours, Iowa Central. There was at least one person from Iowa Central who signed this statement saying, yep, hopefully we can learn something from COVID-19 to do better on climate change because it is here and it's going to hurt everything in Iowa.
Well, I'm a graduate of Iowa Central, and they have a great program out there. We do a lot of welding classes as well, or I'll have to find this and see which member of the staff at Iowa Central.
Yeah, it was actually Julie Erisman. I don't know her personally. There were more than 200 people.
Okay, yeah,
so
sure.
I know a lot of the people, mainly from Iowa State, though. Because Iowa and Iowa State tend to work together. But a former teacher who was a former student of mine is one of the people from Kirkwood Community College. So yeah, we kind of know one another. But a dozen people or so get together, and I'm generally one of those. Figure out this one-page statement and then send it out to find people who will endorse it. And they got to say, "Yep, I agree with this." And it's only one page, which is hard for academics. Really hard.
I bet.
Everybody's, you forgot to say that, and then say, no, we got it. This is it. You agree with it? Sign. So it's a nice thing, and it does show that it isn't just these guys from Harvard and Berkeley and places like that. It really is generally well known that climate change is real, and we need to be doing something about it.
David Osterberg is our guest. I identified him as a co-founder of the Iowa Policy Project, which he is or was. I don't know. Is the name of your group now Common Good Iowa or just?
It is. We merged with another not-for-profit, a child and family group.
Right.
We did some work with them before because when you have a state budget, the amount of money that goes into childcare is really important to, both groups.
Is the headquarters in Davenport now?
No, it's Des Moines and Iowa City. We have a joint. We're still where we were. I guess we were. I haven't been in our office since March. So
where have you been?
There.
Where have you been?
Well, I mean, we're all trying to, like, some of us who are lucky get to work from home. And,
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
and people who aren't lucky, they're the ones that have to go in, and they often get sick, unfortunately.
Well, go ahead, rub it in, Osterberg. Go
Yeah,
ahead,
right.
rub it in.
Sorry.
I'm in the studio today again.
But you're kind of alone, aren't you?
Oh, yeah. A lot of my fellow workers here at the radio station, well, some of the salespeople I haven't seen since the spring, and a couple of the other members of the air staff there, but working from home too. Some of them are high-risk people to start with, so they're at home, which is fine. I don't mind coming in, David. I don't. If I wasn't in the studio, I'd be home probably doing this somehow. So I'm not upset about it at all.
Yeah. Well, keep safe.
Yeah. I'm not somebody to jump on the bandwagon for everything that comes along, but this COVID thing is real, and I don't want anybody to get sick because of me. And I wear the mask when it's necessary, and I social distance, and I wash my hands, and all those things. Sometimes I'm suspicious that maybe this is just a way of keeping our mind off COVID, and sometimes I wonder if these things that we're doing, like wearing masks, really help that much. But I'll do them anyway.
Yeah. I think it helps other people more than it helps us, unfortunately.
Well,
so that's why. Yeah, that's one of the problems. That when you wear a mask, you are doing it for that 80-year-old guy that you're going to pass in the street.
Yeah, that's what the mayor of Iowa City said. He said wearing a mask means you care. Then he enforced mask wearing in Iowa City. I don't think he had quite the spirit of it yet. I mean, if you force somebody to do something, you're not really caring. You're obeying the law. But what do I know?
Well, some are care. Well, most, who knows? But, it's all this number stuff. And I don't know why people put on a mask, but I appreciate when they do.
I want to talk to you a little bit about the climate here in Iowa this past year, because frankly, it kind of sucked once again.
It kind of did.
We had a terrible drought in this area.
Terrible. Yes, you did. It's almost, I heard it compared to 2012 in places.
Yeah. And I've been talking with some of our local farmers and farm groups. I talk with Steve Peterson, who's with the dreaded Farm Bureau. Mm-hmm. And Steve tells me that we're not going to have a bumper crop this year, but we're going to have a very good crop this year, which is excellent. I mean, that's the lifeblood of the economy, certainly here and around the state. I mean, agriculture is still an important part, or the most important part of the economy. We also had a derecho, which I had never heard of before August, by the way. Mm-hmm. And as you know, my son, well, you're over in the Iowa City area, you're in Mount Vernon. The crop land over there was flat in August. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. Acres and acres and acres of ground where the corn and soybeans were flat on the ground.
Yeah, somebody said they saw somebody combining soybeans, and ahead of them, they were running a little bobcat to pick up some of the crap that had got thrown into the fields.
I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt that a bit.
God, I mean, great big grain bins just smashed. Oh my God! Yeah.
My son's neighborhood. I mean, a tree fell on my son's house. It didn't damage it structurally, but I saw even 3 weeks later, huge trees just ripped out by the roots and laying in the street and laying on the parking of people's homes and front yards. I mean, it was if I hadn't known better, I'd have thought it was a tornado. But
derecho. Well, tornado and derecho. Apparently, the guy that came up with the term at the University of Iowa came up with it in the 1880s.
Really? But it's weird. I've paid attention to the weather in Iowa. I mean, it's part of our job here in the radio station is all hands on deck when there's tornado warnings. We all come out the radio station and help. But I've never heard of a derecho. Never.
No, I hadn't either.
Okay. I don't know if they're peculiar to some other part of the country or the world, but I've never heard of them.
Yeah, I think they're really like everything else. I mean, is this climate change? What you have to say is, as the climate warms, you're going to put more power into that atmosphere. More water can be contained. There's more power, and that means that while any particular derecho, you can't say that was caused by climate change. You can say that it's now more likely that we're going to have those kind of weather patterns. Just like you can say, while we may not have more hurricanes, the ones we get, slower, more water, more powerful, a bigger mess.
Wow. So I'm assuming then the reports that we're getting good yields out of the fields are due to the Iowa State University and their hybrid program back there, and good for them.
Yes, and good for them. And Gene Tackley, who is probably one of our leading climate scientists in the state from Iowa State University, he says that the way things are going, we will undo all of that hybridization and all that technology of change in the last 30 years will bring us back to where we had our yields back to where they were in the 70s.
Well, we don't want that. Why is that going to happen? I wonder. I'll have to get him on the air.
We get it. Yeah, Gene Tackley. He's really he's not saying he wants that. He's saying that that's the effect that climate change is going to have. Droughts in the western part and too much water in the eastern part of Iowa.
Well, none of those sound very good.
Now, well, climate change is not good. Let's do something about it. That's the point of these professors putting out this statement.
Well, here, I'm just going to float this by you.
Okay.
Biden has promised to do something about climate change.
Yep.
Do you believe him?
Yeah, well, I suppose because he's part of a jobs program. I mean, you look at the number of wind jobs there are in the nation, and there are like 120,000. That's like twice as many as coal miners. Yeah, there are a bunch of jobs involved in doing something about climate change, especially if you do it by investing in renewables.
All right, David Osterberg has been our guest. He's with Common Good Iowa. That used to be the Iowa Policy Project. Thank you very much.
Hey, bye, Mike.
All right, this is AM 1400, KBFD, the voice of Fort Dodge.
Now, more than ever, we need our leaders to focus on practical solutions for the families of Webster County.
I'm Ann Meyer. During my first term in the Iowa House, I worked to ensure safe and affordable
$3.99 3/4. July down 2 1/4 at 4.03. November soybeans down a penny to close at 10.50. January down 3.5 at 10.48. March down 9.5 at 10.23. May down 7 1/4 to close at 10.17 1/4. December wheat down 12 1/4 cents at 5.95 1/4. Soybean meal down $1.80 a ton at 3.5920. October live cattle down 47 cents at 109.70. December down 47 at 112.62. October feeders down 45 cents at 138.05. November down 142 at 136.45. October lean hogs closed up 47 cents at 77.35, and December up 227 at 66.85. From the farm desk, I'm Dwayne Murley.
Michael Devine, the mayor of Manville.
It's a fancy title for a part-time job.
Michael Devine at AM 1400 KVFD.
That's right, Mayor of Manville, Doctor of Truth. Sam Clovis is here. Sam, you can just call me Mike. Just keep it simple,
Oh, you bet. Well, you can call me Sam.
Well, I appreciate that. I will call you Sam. Sam's a great name. It's a great man's name. Very strong.
It is. It stands for warrior in the Hebrew lexicon. I think it stands for warrior.
Really?
That's the term. Yeah, I think so.
My old Catholic mother, Catholic mother named me after the archangel.
Well, there you go.
There you go.
That's a good one too. Michael is strong too.
That's right.
Michael had a lot to do with a lot of things.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, there's. Well, we don't want to go down that road, I guess. Sam Clovis is our guest, and of course, he's been an academic, an Air Force pilot. He ran for the Democratic nomination for the Senate. Republican. Did I say? I did say Democratic. Yeah, Merry Christmas. The Republican nomination for the Senate, losing to Joni Ernst. You should run again because Joni's going to lose. But and he's been over at Morningside. He's also a former talk show host. How did you ever get to be a talk show host anyway?
Purely by accident. I had, in 2006, I'd gone on as a guest on the anniversary of 9/11, the 5-year anniversary, and with Randy Renshaw, one of the great...
I knew Randy.
Yeah, Randy and from Storm Lake.
Yeah, he passed away, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Sorry.
Yeah, but he was a great guy and a great mentor. I went on there. We hit it off. So I would be a regular guest on his program. And so one day I was in there Black Friday of 2009. And the program manager at the time said, "Hey, we think you're ready to go solo. Could you sit in for Randy?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I suppose." And so I'd never done anything like that before. So they showed me the buttons to hit and not hit. And of course, I screwed them all up. I was on for 2 days. And then a week later, they came back and said, "Hey, can you be on for a week to sub for this couple that are on there?" And I said, "Yeah, 1 hour." And it was a great place. It was between Randy's show and Rush Limbaugh. And I was a college professor, so I had off. And I said, "Sure, I'll come in." And so I did the week, and the phone, I didn't know this, but the phone boards had lit up, and they said, "I don't know who this guy is, but you got to
keep him on." Huh?
Yeah. And so they came to me and said, "Hey, could you feel one of the people had gotten sick and was not able to do it, and they couldn't find the right combination. And so they said, 'Would you mind coming on, or would you do a show?' And I said, 'Well, I'll check with my bosses.' I did. They said it was okay, and that's how I started. And it was that 1 hour after Randy's show and then before the Rush Limbaugh show. And it was 1 hour a day, and I did it for 3.5 years, and over 600 programs. And it was just one of the greatest experiences of my life. It's what got me involved in politics.
Mm-hmm.
And that, as they say, the rest is history. So it was really a remarkable experience. My wife said it was, of all the things that I've ever done, now she doesn't know about my military career and anything, but of all the things I'd ever done, she said, "You're a natural born radio talk show host. This is something you should do and should do again." And she's told me that many times. But I know what they get paid, and I know it's tough, and it's a tough business, and I would do it again if I had the right circumstances.
Oh, no. If anybody out there is wondering what talk show hosts get in Iowa, let me put it this way. I was a truck driver on a construction crew. I drove belly dumps and side dumps on road construction crews.
Right.
Munson out of Britt was where we were located, but I made twice as much the last year I was in the trucking business as I make now.
Yeah.
You get a little security when the kids leave, or in my case, the son left home, and I only have to take care of myself, so I can afford to do this all right. But if not, I mean, I tried to do this as a disc jockey, and I rode the circuit. I was out in North Carolina, Arkansas, all over the place trying to get rich in radio, but never really did. And we were, my wife was not the type to appreciate these moves. I didn't care so much, but we had a little baby, and I could see what the future was going to be for him if I continued on this path. So I decided to do something more stable and stay at home, and it was the right decision, actually. So radio just became a hobby. I lost my fascination with it when I realized I was never going to make any real money in it. So and it's still a great hobby. And
I think it's marvelous. I love it. I think it's one of the greatest, because it gives you a platform, and it gives you the opportunity. For me, a lot of times people wouldn't call in, and my producer would say, well, they're not calling in. Well, then he realized the reason they're not calling in is because they don't want to interrupt me. If I was on a roll, because I'm the professor. I would get on there and I'd give a lesson in the Constitution, or I'd be giving a lesson on government or local government and how that's structured and why it's important. And I would go through all of that because, that essentially was civics that I was teaching. And the other factor was that I'd had these great interviews. I interviewed all the presidential candidates. I tried to interview the Democrats, but very few would ever come on. And it was really stunning to me that, because I'd always told them, I said, all you have to do, I'll give you every bit as much time as I give the Republicans. But, I had very few ever took me up on it. And it was really, I was surprised. And of course, you go through the same thing. But I talked to every potential presidential candidate on the Republican side in 2011 and 2012. And then in 2013, I decided to run for the nomination. And nobody knew who I was, and it really wasn't until February of 2014 that I made a breakthrough over in Cedar Rapids. We had an event there. The 5 of us were there, and it was really a breakthrough because that was the first time some of the money people on the east side of I-35 had seen me and heard me. And it changed everything, because then the money started to come in, and then I was able to compete. I was able to start getting on the radio. I actually had some TV stuff, but we just couldn't compete with Joni. She had millions of dollars. Mark Jacob had millions of dollars, and we couldn't compete with them. But Mark just never connected. He was considered, I think, because he came to Iowa, literally came into Iowa 11 months before the primary season started. So he was considered a carpetbagger, even though he was from Des Moines. He went to Roosevelt High School there, but people didn't take to him. They never took to him because I think a lot of it had to do with his personality. The other part was that he was not considered Iowa. And I think Joni had all of the Branstead.
She looked good, didn't she? She looked good in 2000. What was it? Not 16.
2014.
14 is right. Yeah. She looked good. We had high hopes, but I had high hopes for Governor Branstad when he became Ambassador Branstad, but it didn't work out the way I thought. Anyway, Sam Clovis is our guest. We spent a lot of time in the first segment, so we're just down to a couple of minutes here in this segment, Sam.
Right.
So I got to ask you about the debate last night between Vice President Pence and Senator Harris. Who do you think won that one?
Well, I couldn't watch it. It was like fingernails down a blackboard. So I'm only going off of what I've read about it, and I would say, certainly from our outlets, it looked like Pence got the upper hand because, Harris would not answer, like Biden would not answer the tough questions. And the other part of it is it goes to the moderator again, siding very much with Kamala Harris. That is really, distracting when you sit there and look at the way the moderators try to interject. So Pence is debating two people and not one. And Pence is a very much a gentleman. He not much for interruptions, but Harris didn't seem to be inhibited in doing that at all. So I think overall, Pence walks away with the win. I would say it would be a split decision based on what I saw. What did you think?
I thought Pence won, because Kamala, for one thing, if President Trump would have calmed down in the first one, he'd have beat Biden hands down because Biden was avoiding questions. He didn't know any of his own positions. It was a joke. But no, that really didn't get through. Sam Clovis has a newsletter. How do we get your newsletter there, Sam?
Just send me an email to sam@samclovis.com, sam@samclovis.com, and I'll put you on my mailing list. I put them out about once a month.
All right. Thank you, Sam. We'll talk to you next week.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
This is AM 1400 KVFD, the voice of Fort Dodge.
Common sense problem solver Randy Feenstra is a true friend for Iowa.
20 pages. In the secondary amendment that talked about pre-existing conditions, we did vote against that because it also had in there Iowa was required to join the United States Climate Agreement. And so because of the procedure, a second degree amendment, you can't just strike certain things from it. You have to pull those. You have to either vote yes or no. So yeah, we did vote against that. We also sponsored a resolution though to protect in the pandemic pre-existing condition coverage. We resolved Governor Reynolds to protect from eviction during a pandemic. If someone's lost their job, that's the last thing anyone wants to do is put them out on the street.
You want to take a call here real quick?
Sure, absolutely.
All right. Good afternoon. You're on the air with Representative Meyer.
When they talk about pre-existing conditions, are they talking about if you move from one insurance company to another?
Correct. Yep, that's exactly what they're talking about. So let's say you were diagnosed with diabetes in 2000, and here it is 2000. You've had the same insurance for 20 years. Now it's time for you to move into you've switched your job, or you maybe moving into Medicare or something. They might consider a pre-existing condition and say, okay, we're not going to cover anything that you had before you came to our insurance company. And so anything that you might develop that might be related to diabetes wouldn't be covered. You know what? That's against federal law. We can't do that. And we actually have at this point, have no control over that in the state legislature. But yes, that is what pre-existing conditions mean. If you had it before you came to this insurance company, and know that it is illegal to deny someone coverage for existing conditions in the United States at this point.
When I changed jobs and I went from one insurance company to another, the insurance company I had sent a letter to the insurance company I was going with, and everything was covered.
Yes, because that is the law. All insurance companies have to cover pre-existing conditions. That's exactly right. So that's the way it should be.
Well, I thought if it was like if you say you had, like a house and it caught on fire, then the next day you got insurance on it, then it's trying to turn coverage in for that. So that would be pre-existing condition.
Yeah.
I didn't think like jumping from one insurance company to another was it.
No, it's based on your diagnosis. Like I said, if you've had any condition, if you've had heart disease, diabetes, anything at this point with your insurance company, and you have to switch insurance companies for any reason, it is federal law that those pre-existing conditions be covered by your new insurance. They don't have a choice.
Complaining about?
Exactly. My point exactly. These are lies that have come out. And I'm not going to campaign negatively, but I'm definitely going to defend myself against the lies.
I thought we had a pledge to not campaign negatively from everybody involved.
Well,
so far, yeah. Okay. Hey, thanks for the question.
Thank you. That's a good question.
Yeah, this is AM 1400 KBFD, the voice of Fort Dodge. Yeah. Just for the record, as far as voting the last 2 years on medical issues, where have you been? I mean, what have you voted on?
My focus in the legislature with my background is healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
I'm vice chair of human resources.
Mm-hmm.
So I have voted to the one thing I'm most proud of is legislation that I've actually introduced and the governor signed with mental health services for kids in schools. So I know they tried to do it last year in 2019. allow kids to receive telehealth services if they needed mental health services. This year, I ran it on the House floor. It passed in the Senate, and I'm voting to increase access to health services. I'm also introducing legislation to keep more Iowa doctors in Iowa. I've also voted to increase the number of family practice and psychiatric residencies here in Iowa. We know that access in rural Iowa to some of these doctors is difficult because we don't have enough providers in Iowa. So it's great that we cover the state of Iowa has 3.2 million people in it.
Mm-hmm.
We have over 700,000 that are covered by Medicaid, which is the state coverage for low-income people. So we're covering just under 22% of the population in Iowa. For those people, 100% of their mental health needs are covered. However, they have a problem getting services because we don't have enough providers. We don't, there's a wait. They have to drive far for those services. So that's what we're doing to increase access and increase services in Iowa. Those are a few of the things.
Okay. All right. What, if you were reelected, what would happen in the next session?
I would continue on the same path as far as increasing access to healthcare and mental health services, especially in rural areas. One of the things I introduced, which did not make it through the Senate last time because of COVID, hit right after we passed it on the floor. But one of the bills I passed was a requiring the University of Iowa, your taxpayer-funded university, to 75% of their med school admissions and 75% of their dental school admissions needed to be Iowa residents, or at least done their undergraduate work here in Iowa. Because we know when someone starts to, if someone's educated here, someone's from Iowa, someone grew up here, their family's here, they have roots here in Iowa, chances are they're going to stay here.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, the acceptance, the rate I think is about 66 to 68%
Mm-hmm.
of Iowa residents in those programs. They are accepting a lot of students from the East Coast and the West Coast. And when those kids finish training, they go back there.
They go back home, yeah.
And after that bill was introduced, I heard from doctors all over the state.
I bet you did.
They said that is exactly what's happening. The kids people we're training here are going back because that's where they came from. So we know that if we start here in Iowa, we can keep those kids in Iowa. And you, as the taxpayer funding that university, should have the benefit of being treated by a doctor that was trained in Iowa.
Does the university get more money from out-of-state students?
Yes, they do.
That's why.
This was going to be, I believe, the cost of this was going to be about $400,000.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know that the budget? And now this is the overall budget that we give to University of Iowa, is about $280 million a year. So I guess to keep Iowa kids practicing in Iowa, I think that $440,000 is money well spent.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not out of the ordinary. We've got a med school in Kansas City. They require 90% of their students to be residents of the state. So, because they know if you start here, you're probably going to stay here.
Sure.
So,
I don't know why Bruce Harrell didn't change that. I mean, the faculty at U of I went crazy when he was elected or not as president of the university because he was a Republican. We can't have a businessman running a university. It makes too much sense. But he's retiring now. I wonder who the next the next.
I don't have that information.
Yeah, but that has been going on in our state a long time. It's been discussed a long time, and nobody's ever done anything about it. That's because the university has great lobbyists, and they say we want this money, we need this money, so we can keep paying our president $1 million a year or whatever it is. You know, most of the top 10 wage earners in this state are on the University of Iowa staff. Guess who's number one? Kirk Ferentz. You have a $4.5 million annual salary, produce a mediocre football team, and
oh dear, I know someone out there is going to be angry about that last statement.
Hey, I've been saying it for years. Yeah, I know. Oberhelman hates it.
That's just who I was thinking of.
Yeah. Oberhelman is notorious for pushing back on that. He's called me at least once on the phone when I was talking to somebody else and just really argued with me. But
oh boy.
Yeah, well, that's the way it is. Ann Meyer is our guest. She is running for re-election to House District 9, of course. Just to be clear once again, as far as the Second Amendment is concerned, where are you at?
To be clear, I completely support the Second Amendment.
Right.
In fact, and you probably know about this because it was kind of a big hullabaloo when I was first elected. So this assembly, we passed a constitutional amendment to guarantee the state of Iowa citizens have the right to bear arms.
Of course.
But the assembly before me, they also passed that as well. And apparently there was some mix up in the Secretary of State's office, and it didn't, I'm not sure.
I was always really suspicious of
that.
that. Yeah, that's a high profile bill.
Yeah.
That got snagged into technicality. I don't believe technicalities happen at that level.
Yeah.
Paul Pate's your man, but is our man. But that was really
that
bad.
Was very, very disheartening for a lot of people who worked really hard on that amendment the first time around when I wasn't there. Worked really hard on it again this time. So it just needs to go through the second assembly, which will actually be the third assembly next year. And then it'll go to the ballot.
Do you support open carry?
I don't honestly to have a lot of information about that. I'm not saying I'm against it. I just have to have some more information about that.
That means somebody like me can strap a pistol on, a holster on, and walk down Central Avenue with the pistol in clear sight.
I think as long as you're legally able to own a gun, I don't see why that would be an issue.
I don't think so either. I don't know if you got this text or not, but somebody just texted "Go Blue."
I did not get that text.
But you kind of figured it out, didn't you?
Yeah. My husband is a graduate of University of Michigan, and he's a huge fan.
Yeah. Well, that's okay.
I think he's a little disappointed about the football season this year.
Well, Harbaugh has not turned out to be the second coming, but that's another story altogether. Maybe that's too much pressure. I don't know the future of Big Ten football. SEC and SEC is kind of taken over there, and even Urban Meyer, when he came up to Ohio State, said, "Listen, when where I came from, and he came from the SEC, Big Ten football is not respected. It's just looked at as second tier to us down here in Florida, I guess, which always aggravated me. But I have to get off that. Certainly. Anyway, any closing thoughts here, Ann?
No, I'm just going to be really. I've got today was a busy day. I had a legislative forum this morning. I did several hours of door knocking. After that, talking to voters, where I want to say we're really safe when we go out. In fact, I was on your street today.
Excellent.
We wear a mask. We put our information on the door. We step back and then wait, talk to the voter when they come out and make sure we're distancing. This afternoon, I sat on the Medicaid Advisory Committee, which I serve on. That's a quarterly report. And I'd like to tout the Medicaid program that we have. I know that I hear the biggest criticism was about privatizing Medicaid. But I'll tell you what, we had the reports from the two MCOs that covered it during the pandemic. They went over and above for the Medicaid members. They and the derecho. They delivered food to people's houses. They made sure they had refrigeration for their medication if they had medications that needed to be. So anyway, we're good oversight.
Thank you, Ann. And just for the record, I didn't make a point of inviting you to take Charles's time, did I?
Oh, no, you did not.
Right.
I was available.
I
so
know. There you go.
That's
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you.
I'm Nick Soboleski, a Select Quote agent with a true story that could save you hundreds of dollars a year. A woman named Linda just called. Her husband, Ray, has a $300,000 group life insurance policy, but is changing jobs and can't take it with him. Well, I shopped the many highly rated term life insurance companies we represent, like Prudential and Mutual of Omaha, and found Ray, who is 41 and takes medication to control his cholesterol, a 10-year, $500,000 policy for under $27 a month. That's almost twice the coverage for less than half of what he had paid. If SelectQuote hasn't shopped for your life insurance, you're probably paying too much.
For your free quote, call 800-589-5599. That's 800-589-5599. 800-589-5599.